He is a systems engineer turned project manager who has led at big tech firms and startups. He now teaches and serves as the assistant director of the Project Management Center for Excellence at the University of Maryland. Please help me welcome to the stage John Clay Elliott Johnson.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all of those who are here and chose to be with me instead of getting the happy hour special. I really appreciate it. But I hope that you all enjoy this next hour that we have. It's going to be a bit of a journey. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. So, just to get started, I need to be able to, I'm sorry, am I able to, oh, I am advancing the slides, they weren't showing up here. Okay. And if we can make the slides full so I can see them, that would be great, and we can go that way, the other version. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead. So, we're going to be talking about, first, I want to give you a little story about how I use just-in-time training in order to deliver a truly innovative project and to cut through, let's just say, some challenges that I had. We're then going to get into pre-pandemic trends when it comes to education and how things have really been changing in terms of how we keep ourselves up to date. We're going to then talk about the trends today. And we're going to talk about becoming an intentional learner and how to get started with it. And hopefully by the end of this, you're going to be totally sold on the fact that learning is going to be a great advantage. And that's going to come back again and again. So a little bit about me. First, as I stated, I'm a systems engineer turned project manager. I've never been able to wipe off the smell of being an engineer. I am one. But at the same time, I love people. I love project management. So it's a little bit of both. I started off as an academic researcher at the University of Maryland and then went on to do some airport consulting, which was a blast. I got a chance to do all kinds of airport models. I then worked at Booz Allen for a while, working with the Defense Department mostly, but doing a whole lot of very innovative projects there around civil engineering and civil systems. And then I learned about Agile and became a senior Agile project manager at IBM, and that is a major project I'm going to talk about. After that success, I then thought I could go and start my own company. It had great promise, even had a bunch of orders, but in the end, it went the way of most new companies. And finally, I became a CTO of Softech Enterprises, where we had a big, booming year, really grew that company together with the CEO, Imran Memon, who is a good friend of mine, who I met at IBM. And now I'm the assistant director at the University of Maryland because the director, John Cable, asked me if I would like to start teaching. And he asked me if I want to do some workshops. And I got hooked. I got hooked on teaching, and I decided to leave this great CTO position to come teach. And to be honest, I'm not looking back. So in 2018, after we did a series of workshops, we turned them into a massive open online course, which I'm going to explain, on Agile project management. And that has had over 170,000 students in it to date and continues to grow. And we also have one in product management. But our story begins here, because my first interaction with MOOCs actually happened back when I was trying to transition from being a civil systems engineer building decision software for the government to help them with making good infrastructure investments, to then doing a cutting edge project. So here's my personal example of using MOOCs for just-in-time learning. I started as senior Agile project manager at IBM. I had just left Booz Allen, where my teams were about 5 to 10 people, and now we had a much larger team, and we were doing something brand new. The National Archives actually holds all of the records of the government, only about 10 to 30 years later. But this bow wave from the internet was now beginning to hit the archives, and they knew it was coming. So they had to build something that could scale to the explosion of data and be able to process and make discoverable so that people could hold their governments accountable and also have a history of the Republic. Well, I did know a little bit about Agile and how to work in disruptive environments, building new systems, But I did not know anything about cloud computing, so this diagram on the right looked about as confusing as you can possibly imagine to me. I didn't know about microservices, didn't know about clouds, I didn't understand how the infrastructure worked. So that was my challenge. I decided that I needed to get up to speed. And so I found free courses on Coursera at the time. And it turns out that I had a nice long commute in bumper-to-bumper traffic from home all the way over to the National Archives on the opposite side of the Beltway. For those of you who don't know DC traffic, it's infamous. I think the average commute's like 90 minutes, so I was right dead center. And I had nothing to do. NPR would repeat by the time I got there at least like half the stories because it only runs for about an hour, right? And then it gave me lots of time on my hands. So I opened up my laptop, downloaded a bunch of lectures, and I put them into the tape deck of my car, and I played them next to me while I was in traffic, and I learned cloud computing on my way to work. I mean, you can do this with your phone now, and I realized this probably wasn't the best idea at the time, but it worked. In fact, I got a chance to learn all kinds of great new technologies that were coming on, from cloud computing and how it works, to search engines and how they work. And actually, I'm just going to go back to this image you see here on Coursera. This is actually a picture from the course I took, teaching about inverse density frequencies and how that works in search engines. So this is actually the course that I took. So what were the results? Well, actually, we had an incredible result. It wasn't just me, obviously. It was a great team, a lot of people who are very cutting edge. But by the end of this, I did know a lot about search engines and cloud. And because of it, I was able to gauge effectively. We had a large team of 50 people in total, government and contractors, all fully staffed. It was a $20 million project, and we delivered it in 1 year, and we even pioneered brand new technologies. In the process, we delivered on time, on budget, and very, very profitable. We were able to help the National Archives defend their budget, which was really important because we wanted to keep the business too. We pioneered new technologies in big data, like using Elasticsearch as a service. For those of you who know something about search-based systems, Elastic is the standard now. Back then, Amazon didn't let anybody use the service. It was in beta, but we actually were pioneering using that service, and it's built into the system now. And we stood up a whole new Center for Excellence using a discipline agile paradigm. We called it near-site agile. And the result is that it won IBM's 2015 Project of the Year. So pretty fantastic outcomes. And the thing is that I was maybe at the beginning, early adopter stages of this trend. I wanted to tell you about how education is changing from pre-pandemic to the future, because doing this kind of just-in-time learning so that you can have enough context, enough information to be able to be effective at your job is not new. But it is accelerating. So in 2019, the Harris Group did a poll, and they did a 20-minute survey of over 11,000 people in 19 countries from ages 16 to 70 years old. And what they found is that education is becoming a do-it-yourself kind of process. Everybody's moved to a DIY mindset. The 40-year career is gone. I think we've all known that for a while. But digital and virtual learning is now becoming the new normal. And in fact, it's even having a higher status, and we're seeing higher outcomes with digital and virtual learning. I know it's hard to believe after a year and plus some being pure digital, because I think we all just want to be back in person, but it's very effective. The traditional education is not working currently because what we learn is not what we're going to need forever. And oftentimes, young workers don't see even a need for a college degree. So when we look across the world in terms of where this is happening the fastest, this kind of adoption of a multi-degree, continuous learning, DIY mindset, we do see that China and India have government-led initiatives that are actually driving in this direction, but the US isn't that far behind. And there has been a shift, and there were some inklings about this in 2019 towards also trying to learn soft skills this way. What this has led to is essentially a learner-driven revolution. We have changing expectations and requirements. That means that we need to continuously increase our skills, and those increase in skill demands means that 64% of employers agree that there is a need for continuous learning. They see that the people that they have today have the institutional knowledge, the context about what it is that is the mission of the organization, the people in it, how the systems work, but they don't have all the skills to do the work. Now, before the age of 30, 1 in 10 American adults are actually going to have an advanced degree. And what that means is that hiring leaders view online credentials as being essential, because oftentimes the way they get that is that they do it right as they're entering the workforce so that they can continue to stand out and be ready for that next big promotion. As a result, the shift to digital is well established and it's truly disruptive now. In fact, I'm going to tell you about some degrees that you can get for as little as $10,000. There have been a couple of leaders in this space in particular. One of them, I love to talk about them, Starbucks. They've actually they give a free undergraduate education to any one of their baristas who work with them through ASU. Also, C3.ai recently announced about 2 years ago now that they would pay for anyone to take the data science program from Michigan on Coursera. And not only would they pay them to do it, they would give them a bonus and a raise afterwards if they completed it. So that's how accepted it was. So a big emphasis, especially back in 2019 and before, was on being able to upskill for the digital economy. And so while English as a language was the number one language to learn, coding was the second most important language to learn, according to the question of which of these are going to be most important to know and understand in the business world. And so before the pandemic, this was very much the emphasis of how can we upskill, how can we continuously learn, how can we give people the digital skills that they need. But learning with tech is not enough. And the reason why, and like I said, there are hints of this in the 2019 before material, is that if we look at where the skills are actually going, as AI is being developed, and as we're seeing more and more technology being deployed, it's actually social, emotional, and intelligence skills that are going to continue to grow and still be in higher demand. So I want to show you a little report here from McKinsey. They looked at the change from 2016 to 2030 in terms of what skills are going to be most needed in the workplace. Here you can see the 2016 numbers. Physical and manual skills are very high. Technological skills are fairly low. And here are the numbers they expect in 2030. Now, if we look at the change in terms of growth, you can see that the physical and manual work is definitely going down. And of course, so are the basic cognitive skills. And these are the kind of things that, you would automate it away if you could. We're seeing this go away with things like robotic process automation. But then what we expect to increase some is the higher cognitive skills, like thinking about the problems and understanding them and being able to contextualize and solve complex problems. But also social and emotional skills are growing significantly, 24%. And of course, tech skills are growing too, but if you look at it, and I'm sorry for the formatting issues if you're seeing them up there, that actually shows that the total of higher cognitive skills and social and emotional skills are much greater, even in 2030, than technological skills. Let me give you some more data to back this up. So when you take a look at the Pearson 2021 Global Survey, it shows that, in fact, this trend is increasing. The top skills, this is post-pandemic. This is now that we've all been digital. We're all used to talking and working with each other on Zoom. They're saying that top skills for school-age children are adaptability, digital skills, and concern for others. 83% of parents have said that the pandemic has made them and their families, and especially their children, much more aware of the needs of others and being more empathetic with them. And in fact, even those at the college level, the top skills that they need are self-motivation, adaptability, and emotional resilience. Now, I think this probably resonates with all of us, given what we've been through, right? But nearly 3 in 4 respondents said that the result of the pandemic has caused them to actually have a greater sense of connectedness and understanding with others and what they're going through. And this is the trend that is actually going on. So the question is, do we still need to focus on digital? Well, according to the 2021 report, it shows as a society we are still missing digital skills. Here, this report, by the way, all of them are cited. You can go look them up. They're on the presentation. This report did a survey of how well people are doing across a gambit of skills. And the average on this chart that you can see here of cognitive skills, interpersonal skills, self-leadership, and digital skills is 57. And the two lowest areas are in the digital skills group. However, it also shows that we're missing on the project management skills. Earlier we heard about having a good vision and communication with stakeholders in order to align them. Well, that's the two that are also critically missing here as well. So we have a lot of data that's telling us that we actually need to improve how we work and be able to work in a more complex environment. So the foundational skill sets are these. We want to be able to add value beyond the technology. That's being able to think about the applications. We want to be able to operate in a digital environment, and that means that we need to be able to understand how the technology works so that we can use it appropriately. And then we need to be able to continually adapt to new ways of working. And that means being able to have that emotional resiliency, have that empathy, be able to recognize and be self-aware of what's going on with you as well so that you don't end up having conflicts that are unnecessary and so that you can be more motivated. And when we take a look at outcomes, the most unique among high-income earners are those that understand the digital systems, have software use and development skills. Both of those two are the digital ones we pointed out earlier, as well as planning and ways of working and communication. But the most highly correlated among the high-income earners are work plan development. Right? Everyone in here, I think, is a planner, right? Followed by asking the right questions. Also a skill that us project managers should excel at, and most of us do. Having self-confidence and organizational awareness, which sounds a lot like what we just heard about with stakeholder management and before that, with being able to manage change. So while this is where we focus because it's unique and it stands out as like a bright spot of growth, the reality is that we still need to focus on the cognitive self-leadership and interpersonal skills because that's where the real money is made. That's where everybody who is actually leading the organization, that's where they excel, and those are the skills that are most correlated with those outcomes. So let's take a look at some skill correlations for happiness at work. I'm going to talk about 3 outcomes in particular, and then we're going to take a look at how this breaks down. First, let's take a look at the category. And by the way, what you're going to see here are a number of bars, and these bars represent the percentage likelihood of someone in that category having that skill. An increase in that percentage would increase this bar. So in terms of job satisfaction, we're looking at things like self-confidence, and we're taking a look at the ability to cope with uncertainty and having self-motivation and wellness. If you look down the list, you'll see a few others. In terms of high income, we have work plan developments, organizational awareness, and self-confidence at the top. And if you look at when it comes to employment, we have adaptability, coping with uncertainty, and synthesizing messages at the top. If we count all the digital skills that are on this list, I'll show you where they are. We only count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of the top 60 skills for having highly correlated outcomes of happiness at work, job satisfaction, high income, and employment are digital. The rest are not. So this leads to ask, how can we gain these skills? How can we be most successful? And what should we be learning? And so the argument I'm going to make is that through continuous learning, you can achieve the skills that matter most across all 3 of these outcomes. First, when it comes to synthesizing messages, if you learn the latest material, you can put together the message that actually brings all stakeholders together. You learn the language that they speak, you're able to know the material. When it comes to coping with uncertainty, well, if you can cover your knowledge gaps, if you've had exposure to the material before, your anxiety comes down, right? This is one of those cases where test prep gurus will always tell you, test, 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 and try again, so that by the time you get to a test, you do a lot of preparations, you're not going to have any problems. When it comes to adaptability, and in this case, we're rounding out the employment outcome, being able to switch and being able to move to a new role, a new responsibility, is much easier if you have learned broadly. If you have the ability to kind of map your framework of thinking to other ways of thinking so that you can step into those roles and be able to actually take on and relate what it is that the new material is talking about. So learning also gives us a lot of self-motivation and wellness. It keeps us fresh and active mentally. I'm going to come back to that in just a second as well. And then in terms of work plan developments, well, if you can improve your PM skills and planning under uncertainty by learning some of the new techniques that are out there around how to manage given uncertain requirements, and there are a lot of them. I mean, Agile is not just a monoculture. There's also a lot of lean techniques that you can use as well. That could be a really great way to use learning to continue to advance your skills that are going to help you. Organizational awareness, the ability to learn the new ways of working is going to be key, being able to adapt as the organization is growing, and then learning things like we saw in the last presentation about stakeholder identification so that you can do that better. And lastly, of course, and most importantly, self-confidence. That actually tops out the list in terms of both job satisfaction and high income. Having self-confidence is a big deal. Well, there's no way to be more self-confident than to educate yourself and become truly aware of the material that it is that you're working with. So the question then becomes, all right, I know I need to learn. That's my continuous advantage. I understand that if I do this, I'm going to have the skills that are going to allow me to have higher income, job satisfaction, to stay employed. So how can I get started? Well, there are two keys to success, and then there are a couple of principles, and I'll go over them with you. The first one is adopt a growth mindset. And we heard about that earlier in terms of the change lecture, where the fixed mindset is that there is essentially a pie. It is of a certain size, and it cannot grow. And that includes also all of your systems, your abilities. You've maxed out. You've reached your potential. But if you have a growth mindset, then you believe that this is just the launch pad. This is the opportunity to keep growing. And that growth is always going to mean change, but that also means that you can get better. And so when you run into a challenge, that isn't that your system is failing, that's an opportunity to learn. And then the second, and this one I really like, is feed your curiosity. Because there's actually very few things that conquer fear and hate better than curiosity. I know a lot of people would say love. But the reality is that studies have shown being curious about something that is unfamiliar to you, being curious about something that is different, actually completely moves your thinking to another part of the brain where you can't actually have the emotions of love and hate. You're curious, and it actually replaces those thought patterns entirely. So if you can stay curious and believe that you can continue to grow, then then you can start to practice these core skills and get a lot out of them. First, set small, clear goals. Second, remove all distractions. That means for many of us that you may have to put the phone on the other side of the room or on silent when it's time to learn, right? It may mean that you don't learn in front of the TV, okay? You put yourself into an environment where you're not sitting in a place where you're going to be interrupted. You let other people know that you're going to be learning for the next hour, and therefore they're not going to come and interrupt you. So you plan around it. You also need to get feedback. Feedback is vital for driving learning and mastery and actually engaging your brain. And you need to conduct what we call deliberate practice. So deliberate practice, I'm going to break it down here. There are some common mistakes and some better alternatives. The first is, a common mistake is trying to improve everything all at once. So I don't know a lot about, let's say, Agile. I'm going to try to learn everything about Agile. I'm going to go take a 2-day crash course. I'm going to go take a 4-day crash course to become a safe, professional consultant. Or I'm going to try to learn everything about Agile so that I can give a whole presentation on Agile. Well, maybe you don't do that. Maybe instead of setting those goals, you try to focus on just one thing to improve. Maybe you can learn about something like how to plan better, how to manage a backlog instead of managing a fixed schedule, how that might help you in some cases. And in some cases, it may not. I mentioned earlier in a Q&A that I work in a more traditional environment. We need a schedule. We don't have the ability to work on whole teams with backlogs, and that's actually something I miss. Another thing is spending too much time on one skill. If you are always learning the same thing again and again, eventually your brain's going to turn off. So I'm going to tell you a couple of tricks to fix with that. But first is set a goal, make sure you learn it, focus on one thing, learn, do, reflect, and then move on. Move on because you will use that skill more if the things that you continue to learn are building on top of it. Don't continue to focus on one skill and try to make it perfect forever. And then last, waiting for the formal opportunity, like, okay, now you're in charge of the digital team. Now you're going to be in charge of the test team. So you should learn all about building test cases. Instead, be opportunistic. Just go out and start learning what you think is going to be useful to you, right? If you do this, then you'll be ready and be able to identify the opportunities. And you're also not going to be doing it for anyone but yourself because you recognize what it is that you need, and you're going to be setting your own goals and motivations along the way. Lastly, and very importantly, reflect and evaluate how you're doing. And in order to do that better, I'm going to give you what are called ultra learning techniques. Okay, has anyone here ever heard of Scott Young and his crazy ultra learning projects? The most famous one is that he learned and passed all the courses in the undergrad of computer science for MIT in 1 year instead of 4. He basically compressed it from 4 years down into 1. That meant accomplishing a couple of courses in a matter of like 4 or 5 weeks. That used to be like a semester long. Oh, and some even in days. Well, Scott Young wrote a book called Ultra Learning. It's great. What he said about learning is that we really need to run it just like a project. And he gave 7 key principles. You can download it from scottyoung.com. And I'm not affiliated with him, by the way. I just think his stuff is good. The first key principle of ultra learning is design your project. Start off with a plan and design what you're going to actually focus on. Make sure you narrow it down. You also can get a lot of mileage out of using a mind map, which I'm going to talk about again in a second here. But that is step 1. Usually 10 to 15% of your time should be spent on just designing the learning project before you do it, right? Don't just jump in. Just, okay, I'm going to take this course. I'm going to show up the first day. Okay, what do I need? Tell me everything. You know what? I'm just going to listen. Tell me where I need to go and what I need to do. Don't do that. Decide that you're going to learn something, learn about what the opportunities are, learn about who's done it well before you, and then design out how you're going to learn what you need to while focusing on just what you need. Next, training focus. You need to make sure that you're able to be productive. In fact, you need to eliminate distractions, and you need to have a schedule. You need to know when you're going to do your learning. Third, learn actively. And this means you need that feedback. You need to have quizzes. You need to have challenges. You need to come up with ways to validate beyond your own bias that you've actually achieved the learning that you said you were going to achieve. You need to have a way to keep yourself accountable for progress. Feedback cycles. There are long and slow feedback cycles, but the key is that short feedback cycles engage your brain, long feedback cycles ensure memory. That's kind of the shorthand. Short feedback cycles make sure that you're actually thinking because it's kind of like in a conversation where you don't start thinking until you start talking. It's the same thing when you're learning. You don't start really learning something until you have to be quizzed on it, which is the reason why we put a lot of quizzes in. And then a spacing effect, interleaving materials. So let's say you have a couple concepts you need to learn in order to focus on this one skill. Well, interleaving those is going to be much better, and that means doing A, then B, then C, then coming back to A, then B, then A, then C. That's going to be a lot more effective than just trying to learn all of A, and then all of B, and then all of C, for a number of reasons. Attention, retention, everything. You also need to make sure that you have depth of processing. And one of my favorite techniques about this is that you try to teach it to somebody else. Explain it to them. See if you can pass what we might call, the partner test. Explain it to your partner in a way that is both interesting and that they can understand so that they don't go, okay, let's talk about something else. If you can keep your partner interested, let's say for like a minute or two before he or she or they are saying, oh, that's great, but can we move on? Then you might have actually learned that. You can also use a technique of writing out an explanation to someone as if you were teaching it to them. That's another way to do it. And then lastly, overlearning. So it's kind of like, if you all have seen or heard about change and marketing cultures and how to get people to really think about something. When you're tired of saying it, that's when they're starting to listen. It's kind of like when you're tired of learning it, that's when your brain has actually started to remember it. So you need to go well beyond what you think is the point at which you've mastered something, and you can make sure you've done that with the right kind of tests. So there are some great benefits about this, and we talked earlier about self-motivation and wellness as being one of those key skills. Well, it turns out that there's this term called brain plasticity. And while previously it was believed that the brain only had a capacity to really reorganize, when we were babies or children, it turns out that this capacity is there for the lifetime. Everyone can continue to learn. And our brain reorganizes, and it's that process of reorganizing and forming new connections with synapses that are firing together and wiring together to store skills and procedures, to score facts, to store your understanding and relations of concepts to each other. That's how we're actually able to form memory and experience. So as we reinforce what we know, those pathways actually become stronger. And there's a forgetting process that happens. And there's a great book, it's not in my references here, but I'll tell you who wrote it. Sanjay Sharma wrote this book called Grasp, and he helps to lead the edX team over at MIT in academic innovation. And basically, what he gives the case for is that if we couldn't forget, we would be very dysfunctional. Let's just put it that way. So we're designed to forget, which means that we need to reinforce to remember. And as a result, when it's well done, it will be very long-lasting. There are things that we need, things that we don't practice we weaken. I just talked about that. And the brain is designed to forget, so make sure that you are continuing to learn. The benefits of this in terms of human development and in terms of longevity are significant. It buffers against trauma. It buffers and helps manage whenever you actually have physical trauma or emotional trauma. It also enables more resilience, even under brain damage scenarios. And the nervous system, therefore, is able to adapt and survive. So if you really want to have a young, fresh mind forever, you need to continually learn. All right, so the question then becomes, we know that, first off, learning just in time can help you do and take on projects you never thought possible. We know that, for a fact, continuous learning is going to be able to help us increase those skills that are going to make us happier at work through job satisfaction, higher income, and continuing to be employed. And we now know how to learn. But what should we learn? Well, let's talk about the different opportunities that are out there. Probably nobody in this room is this level, but maybe a few are. We have the analyst, who can also be a project coordinator or become a senior analyst, right? This is kind of a typical PM career path. At those levels, you're an individual contributor. You should focus a lot on personal performance and technical skills, and that's primarily what you need to succeed there. But then as you move up and you start managing more team efforts, such as being a scrum master, a project manager, of course, or associate product manager, you'll start getting into higher levels of skills. There are groups that I'm going to call the technical specialists, the delivery and execution focus group, and the discovery and marketing group. And it's actually this middle tier where you have to be able to lead teams effectively. And so here it makes a lot of sense to understand ways of working, planning, communicating even more, as well as those social and emotional skills that are going to help you reduce conflicts on the team. So a lot of team leadership. This is also important even for the technical specialists, like the risk managers and the project schedulers. I don't know if anyone out here is an EVM specialist and does a lot of CPIC control kind of work. Anybody here do like capital improvements? No? Okay. Well, it'd be like half the room if we were in DC. There's a lot of governance over there. But those kinds of, even though they're technical, even though what they manage are complex schedules that are loaded with resources and dependencies, and they run Monte Carlo simulations in order to identify potential futures and ensure that you're having the best risk-based schedule, they still need to be able to lead by being able to be a good technical leader and being able to communicate what it is that they're identifying in their models to help decision-making of the team. We also, of course, have senior project managers that have to lead teams of teams, and then a product manager. How many people here have started to hear the term product management a little bit more now? Anyone else noticing that it's starting to creep in, right? You're seeing it a lot more, primarily because of Agile, but also because of the fact that product management actually is moving towards project management as well. We're going to see a lot more product managers in our space, and we ourselves are going to have to start to learn some of these skills if we want to operate effectively in our markets. And then after that, you get to organizational leadership, like the program manager, senior product manager, portfolio manager, and director. And of course, all these salaries mileage may vary, but the point is, like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Do you want to be technical? Do you like to own the schedule? If that's the case, there are lots of courses out there to help you learn these skills. You can learn the simulations. Do you want to become someone who focuses on delivery and execution? Is that where you thrive? Do you love getting things done? Or maybe you're really interested in how to delight customers, market well. If that's the case, maybe you're more further on the right. But whatever your next role is, look at that role, identify what the key skills are, do a self-assessment, and there are plenty of opportunities to do those, and say, okay, what do I need to work on? And we actually have a couple of self-assessment tools that are out there. And I'd be happy to talk with you more about that, but the point is, target your role, learn the skills, and then get started. So, research your role and skills that you need to have, identify one new skill, remember, one at a time, and the strategy is work on one thing, build it, and then move on. Then, write down the key elements. When you develop a mind map or something like it, identify all the concepts, facts, and procedures that you need in order to really learn that material. Make sure that it's comprehensive. Not everything's going to have all three in abundance. Sometimes it's going to be more procedures. Sometimes it's going to be more facts, like a language. But you need to identify what they are. Then, set meaningful challenges. Make sure that you have challenges that are going to hold you truly accountable, that you've actually learned what you said you're going to learn, such as getting certified, passing some kind of proficiency exam, or doing a project. Like, do a project within your learning that you actually have to deploy something that works. And then build a schedule with resources to get there. That means you have to look at who has done this before you, what have they learned, use the best and most available. And one of the examples is the no-pay MBA, where the person, Picard, she actually was able to give herself an entire MBA degree for free, or nearly free. And she has this website, nopaymba.com, where you can see what it is that her journey was. She also did a book on it, but it's really effective. And I'm going to give you now the breakdown of all the options that you have for continuous learning. So in terms of continuous learning, first off, there's YouTube University. And there are also open courseware. But these are freely available, and of course, we're all using them right now. Now, with those, you get a video, but you don't get anything else. Then you have these kind of PMI chapter events. These are good, but even though we get some interaction, they're still a bit passive. So this is a good scanning opportunity, right? You're scanning and figuring out what to learn. But you don't come here to become an expert in social and emotional intelligence skills, right? You come here in order to become aware of what it is that you need to learn and go deeper, or maybe learn a couple of tidbits to help you here and there. What's available now that wasn't available before 2012, and especially has grown in 2020 with the year of the MOOC, is massive open online courses. That's that laptop I had open next to me while I was driving on DC highways, bumper-to-bumper traffic. And they actually provide you with a number of elements. First, it's free to audit, or you can pay to get a certificate and get those kinds of feedback mechanisms. It has cutting-edge content because they're being deployed regularly. And it includes your text summaries so that you can read or watch, the quizzes and references to dive even deeper on stuff that maybe you didn't get as well. You can always pay to get certified, and many of them are free right now. In fact, if you go on Coursera, there's one that's about diversity, equity, inclusion, and being an inclusive leader that's totally free. I actually used that in my class in the last semester. It was great. I highly recommend it. And they cost about $100 to $200 for 10 to 15 contact hours or PDUs. So that's a pretty good price. And the cost efficiency then is about $15 per PDU. You can tell that I know who I'm talking to because I'm talking about the efficiency of the price of a PDU. Short courses. Now, short courses are a brand new thing that with the popularity of MOOCs started to grow, and now it's really growing. And essentially what it is that you have like a college course that has the same kind of material as you see on a MOOC, but then not only do you get the cutting edge curriculum, you also get faculty support. And that means that you can have projects and discussions. You have a big class, but it's not too big. You don't get lost in it. And normally they cost about $2,000, but they're a lot more time. They're about 60 to 80 contact hours. But here's the thing, they're delivered very quickly. So if you need to do a lot of learning right now, and you need to transition, these might be a good choice. The cost efficiency is still pretty good, $30 per PDU. Okay, so now that you know where to go, the next step I would suggest is start with MOOCs. They're extremely fast growing. In fact, I'm going to show you a chart here. This is 2015 to 2020. In 2015, there are 35 million learners on the MOOC platform. That's a little bit higher than all of the people in universities in the United States. Today, it's 180 million. There are just so many more people out there taking these courses now, and they have been refined and refined in terms of how well they work. The number of courses, there are 16,000 you can pick from, and 950 participating universities today. The major platforms include Coursera, edX, and FutureLearn. Each of them have their benefits and their strengths. Coursera has a lot of offerings. It's the biggest marketplace. It's also a subscription. edX is actually the most curated, and FutureLearn focuses on soft skills and degrees. They actually have the most number of degrees still. Now, you can also use a third party, ClassCentral.com. That's a place where you can go in order to get aggregations of MOOCs across all the platforms. They have reviews, very candid reviews. I go there to find out what's going well and not well in my courses. Some of the stories there are fantastic as well. And they're even enabling you to now take YouTube courses, which is pretty cool. They've basically wrapped the YouTube courses with their own learning management system, which is fantastic. And there are some others like Udemy and Udacity, and Udemy is great. The only problem is it's P2P, and many of them are paid only, so it's kind of, buyer beware. Sorry, that's Udacity. And Udemy is mostly tech skills. So, in summary, I'm going to say continuous learning is the best advantage and the best strategic advantage that you have. It worked for me extremely well. By the time I finished learning all my Coursera courses, I was speaking like a native architect. I just don't suggest that you do it while driving. It helps you gain job satisfaction, higher incomes, and stay employed. And of course, you don't want to be driving while doing it. You want to learn intentionally, make sure that you stay curious, focus, and get feedback. And there are, of course, many options from PMI to MOOCs to short courses. So just enjoy the journey, get started, stay confident, and stay informed. Hope that was enjoyable. I'd love to take any of your questions after the session is over. And you can also connect with us at our virtual booth. Like I said, we have a lot of free courses, and we're happy to educate you. And I hope this was really informative and it helps you reach your learning goals. Thank you.